Two men are waiting on an empty road. A tree. Evening. They have been waiting for a very long time. Audiences are conditioned to expect a story that travels somewhere, a journey with a destination, or a conflict with a resolution. This story provides neither. The core action is pure, unending waiting. Without the distraction of a plot, the audience is left with nothing but the uncomfortable recognition of their own idle time. The opening dialogue sets the premise. One character struggles with a boot, gives up, and sighs. Nothing to be done. This is an anti-story. By withholding the typical milestones of drama, Beckett forces those watching to confront the bare, unvarnished mechanics of their own existence. Samuel Beckett was a perpetual outsider. Born to a Protestant family in Catholic Ireland, he spent his life navigating worlds he never fully belonged to. He eventually settled in Paris, working as a secretary for James Joyce and immersing himself in the city's literary elite. But his perspective was truly forged by the arrival of World War II. During the Nazi occupation, he watched as the thin coating of civilization was stripped away, replaced by an atmosphere of constant, silent threat. Beckett joined the resistance, carrying messages and hiding people from the Gestapo. When his network was betrayed, he fled to the rural Vaucluse, spending years in a state of helpless, frozen waiting. This period of fear and stagnation defined his work. He learned that human endurance isn't found in grand actions, but in the ability to stay put when there is nowhere left to go. In 1953, Beckett channeled that wartime paralysis into Waiting for Godot. He began by systematically dismantling every tradition of the stage. His theater of the absurd refuses to provide the comforts of a standard play. There is no psychological growth for the characters, and the dialogue frequently collapses into nonsense. He abandoned the traditional dramatic arc of climax and resolution, replacing it with a cyclical equation: birth, suffering, and death, repeating without progress. The set itself is a void. By placing characters in a featureless landscape, Beckett creates an architectural emptiness the viewer must fill. This lack of theatrical escapism traps the audience. Without a plot to follow, the viewer is left to dwell on the monotony of their own daily routines. Albert Camus, a contemporary of Beckett, also grappled with this meaningless universe, but his response was one of active rebellion. Camus pointed to the myth of Sisyphus, suggesting we find purpose by embracing the struggle. Pushing the boulder defies the void. Beckett's vision is bleaker. Here there is no boulder to push and no hill to climb. There is only the stillness of the wait. While Camus romanticized the struggle, Beckett captured a different reality. He depicted the modern state of paralysis, a life suspended between false hope and quiet despair. This suspension is held together by one question: who is Godot? Audiences often treat the name as a puzzle to be solved. Some see a religious god, others see impending death or a promise of political salvation. Today, Godot might be the algorithm, the next notification, or the pending update promising to make scrolling feel worthwhile. But Beckett insisted the savior's identity was irrelevant. If he meant a specific entity, he would have named him. Godot is a necessary fiction, a reason to stay put. The focus shifts from the one being waited for to the act of waiting itself. Vladimir and Estragon are the anchors of this void. They lack individual histories or clear origins, existing primarily in their proximity to one another. Vladimir operates through the intellect. He worries about theology and manages the passage of time. Estragon represents the physical body, fixated on his hunger, his dreams, and his aching feet. They bicker, they torment each other, and they fail to remember yesterday. Yet they cannot separate. When Estragon begs Vladimir not to leave him, he is answered with an embrace. This cycle of bickering and reconciliation reveals them as two halves of a single human consciousness. In a universe without meaning, their refusal to abandon one another becomes Beckett's definition of resilience. But the road is not entirely empty. Two other figures are approaching, Pazzo and his servant Lucky. In the next part of our study, we will examine the ropes that bind them and how their arrival introduces the burdens of systemic power and mastery into the void. We end on the play's recurring final words. Well, shall we go? Yes, let's go. They resolve to leave, yet they do not move. They remain exactly where they were, speaking of action, while staying perfectly still. We return to a country road where two figures are dwarfed by a skeletal tree and a vast landscape, waiting for salvation that never arrives. This is the landscape of Albert Camus' Absurd, the collision between the human search for meaning and the silent indifference of the universe. Samuel Beckett understood this paralysis personally. During the Second World War, he spent months in hiding with the French resistance, waiting for instructions in a chaotic world. The arrival of two new figures on this road disrupts the idea that physical motion provides an escape from the void. A thick rope suddenly snaps into focus. On one end is Pozzo, the loud, confident master. On the other, his silent, heavily burdened slave, Lucky. This dynamic literalizes Hegel's master-slave dialectic. By outsourcing every physical task, Pozzo has become dependent on his servant, losing his own humanity in the process. The consequences manifest in Act 2. Pozzo reappears completely blind, having lost all orientation and his very sense of time because he relied entirely on the slave to lead him. Lucky is, Beckett suggests, the lucky one. He possesses a role, a direction, and a master to serve in a universe where the rest of us are merely waiting. This reveals a deeper form of paralysis, being entirely free, yet possessing no purpose other than to stand by a tree and wait. Lucky speaks only once. Commanded by Pozzo to think for the group's entertainment, he unleashes his only action in the play. What follows is a torrent of academic jargon, theology, and philosophy, a 300-word monologue that refuses to resolve into a single coherent thought. As the speech progresses, the actual structure of the language fails, the syntax collapses, and the logic disintegrates into noise. This performance enacts the literal disintegration of civilization's logical architecture, showing what happens when human thought exhausts itself. To those trapped in endless waiting, the entire history of human intellectual achievement sounds like this: meaningless, overlapping static. Between the first and second acts, exactly one physical change occurs. The barren tree pushes out 4 or 5 small, vibrant green leaves. This minimal symbol of spring suggests that the natural world is refusing to remain entirely dead. It poses the play's most difficult question: is one tiny sign of biological growth enough to justify the continuation of the wait? The leaf reveals the cruelty of time. It proves that while the world is moving forward, the men beneath the tree remain locked in a total narrative paralysis. The final exchange of both acts mirrors itself with absolute precision. Vladimir and Estragon verbally agree to leave, yet they remain motionless on the stage. The words say, "Let's go," but the bodies stay planted. Is returning to the same tree to wait every day an act of free will, or is it a symptom of total paralysis? Anyone who has ever resolved to change their life tomorrow, yet remained stagnant today, has lived this stage direction. Beckett's 1948 play anticipated the 21st century experience of digital consumption and infinite scrolling. The algorithmic feed functions as Godot, constantly promising that one more scroll will finally deliver something meaningful. The boy messenger fails to recognize Vladimir and Estragon every day, forcing them to restart their wait from zero. Algorithmic feeds replicate this cycle by presenting each update as a clean slate, resetting the user's anticipation without ever providing a meaningful conclusion. Scrolling alone in the dark is the exact manifestation of this trap, knowing that nothing is coming, yet refusing to leave. This is Samuel Beckett, the author behind the bleakest play in the Western canon. But paradoxical hope lies within the text. Stripped of purpose, religion, and progress, the two men still possess each other. Their choice to keep each other company is not a solution to the absurd,
but a defense against it. This enduring companionship acts as a radical, quiet humanism that defies the emptiness of the universe. Spending a lifetime waiting for a salvation that never arrives, while ignoring the person sitting beside you, remains the play's most devastating observation.